Well, welcome to Ask Aaron. As I said last week, we're a week behind with our messages. So today's questions will mainly be about a sermon I gave 2 weeks ago about apathy. And next week, we're going to answer some random questions that I got because I did not preach this last weekend or this coming weekend at our church. So I'm going to answer a couple questions for you today and then a few more for you next week that aren't really message specific. But these two questions today are about the message I gave about apathy a couple weeks ago. Okay, so with that said, you can find that message hillcityhudson.org/media on our YouTube page or Facebook. And as always, my views are mine. They're not the church's, but I think they agree with me on most of the stuff. And if you've got any questions, comments, or concerns, please leave those in the comments section below, and I will try to get back to you ASAP. All right. So the idea of my sermon was that as Christians, we are called to be better than being apathetic. That the main issue facing the American church in 2021 is apathy. That we believe that we have all of the stuff, all of the money, all of the medications, all of the cures for what ails us. And so why would we need God or need to be obedient to God or follow God when we could just use that stuff or those pills or whatever the case may be, substitute other people into a place of a relationship with God? And so couple great questions. I talked about the verse in Revelation where the angel sort of speaking on behalf of God says, I wish that you were either hot or cold, not lukewarm. If you're lukewarm, I'll spit you out of my mouth. And so the question that was asked is, will lukewarm Christians make it to heaven? If a Christian is lukewarm, they don't know, if they want to follow God or not. They're sort of living this life where they say they believe, but they're not really living a lifestyle that proves that they believe. Will they make it to heaven? And I think that this is a good question, an important question, but it's also kind of a sad question. And let me explain why. It's a good question because I think there is, a bar, right? Like Romans says that you have to confess with your mouth and believe in your heart. And as I've stated in other Ask Aarons, I personally believe that the believe in your heart part is the part that will motivate you. If you really do believe that Jesus is Lord, that it will motivate you in your heart to be different, to be, trying to grow and mature spiritually, to try to be a different person than you were before you were in a relationship with Christ. And so, yes, there is a bar and there is, this sort of hurdle that you have to clear in order to get to heaven. But the problem is with that bar, it means that there's a minimum, right? It means that there is the lowest possible thing that you can do. And lots of people like to point to the thief on the cross next to Jesus. Jesus says, today you will be with me in paradise. In other words, yes, you're going to be able to spend eternity with me, even though the only thing you did was believe in your heart in this last moment of your life, right? The deathbed confession. And so, yes, I think there is a lowest possible bar, lowest possible common denominator, whatever you want to call it, to get into heaven or to get into the new earth and spend eternity with Jesus. But that shouldn't be our goal. And so will lukewarm Christians make it to heaven? I think it really depends on why they're lukewarm. If they're lukewarm because they're not really sure what they believe in their heart, and they're a Christian only by confession, and they're a Christian only by, religious affiliation, then no, I don't think that lukewarm in that way Christians are going to get to heaven, right? I think that lukewarm Christians that aren't really sure what they believe in their heart and haven't really committed themselves to Jesus, but are really sort of going through the motions of the Christian faith because they grew up in it or because their family wants them to, their spouse wants them to, et cetera, et cetera. Those people probably have, they got to get over the bar. They have to try to do a little bit more and find out, put themselves in a position to truly decide what it is that they believe. But there are people who are, Christian, that do believe in their heart, but they just don't have the gumption to actually do the things that we're called to do. And let me give you this example, right? Like, I know that eating a better diet or less food or exercising twice as much as I currently exercise would make me more physically fit. I believe that. I know that to be true. But there are just things about me that keep me from, I rode a bike 14 and a half miles today. I could have ridden a bike 20 miles. I could have ridden a bike 40 miles. There are things about me that keep me from doing that. I ate a bowl of cereal for breakfast/lunch. I could have had a salad. I could have had, sauteed vegetables. Or there are things that I could do that I believe would make me healthier, but I just don't do them because I'm either apathetic or I'm swayed by temptation, whatever the case is. And in those situations, I think and believe that there are Christians who truly do believe in their heart, but they just are caught up in the world and the sins of the flesh and all of those things that you want to call it. And those people, yes, I do think, right? They do believe in their heart. I think they will get into heaven. They will spend eternity with God, but probably by the skin of their teeth. And Jesus is not super happy about the lifestyle they're living, because here is the truth. An apathetic person is really setting a very poor example to the world about what a Christian should be. And I think that's why Jesus is saying, I'll spit you out of my mouth. I don't want anything to do with you, because you are lowering the bar for what it looks like to follow Jesus for other people as they look to you for what it means to be a Christian. And that's not something that he's really excited about. Okay, so will lukewarm people get to heaven? Yes and no. And it depends on the situation, but really the bar is not where we should be aiming, right? We should try to get as far away from that line or clear the hurdle by as much as we can. Our goal is to grow and mature, all right? Second question, it's a great question. Is there an example of an apathetic person in the Bible, and how did it turn out for them? I kind of racked my brain on this one because I think there are probably several examples. But the one that really came to mind right off the bat, and I think serves well, is Samson. And you might be thinking, why Samson? Here's the deal. Samson was called by God to be set apart, to be better than every other person, really around him in his time. The reason he didn't cut his hair was because of religious tradition and who God had called him to be. And so Samson is given this amazing gift of strength, and he's basically told, if you follow God, if you listen to God's call on your life, life will go well for you. In fact, you will be able to do things that other people just aren't. But Samson sort of just goes through the motions and abuses his gift and is given all sorts of chances and really just screws it up. He's got women issues, he's got pride issues, and in the end, his apathy and his pride and his non-following Jesus or God's call on his life is what costs him his strength, and then he gets his eyes gouged out, and eventually he dies because of the mistakes that he's made. And yes, God gives him back his strength, but his ability is used in the end for his downfall and to accomplish the purpose of God. And so I sort of view this as, right, God has given us as 21st century Americans all sorts of tools and gifts, whether it's technology or the money that we have, the affluence that we have as Western Christians, or whether it's the ability to reach other people through forms of communication, print. There's so many things. The internet. There's so much that we have at our disposal that other generations haven't had, that God has gifted us with and entrusted us with, and we, even to the point of modern medicine, right? We use it And instead of seeing it as a gift from God and a miracle of God, we abuse it. We say this has replaced God for us, for our culture, and we wind up putting our trust in it, and eventually it pulls us away from God, and it can be the downfall. I think about this verse that I had an experience with. I always wondered how people smarter than me with doctorates and postdoctorates could not believe in God. What were they seeing that I was missing? And was I just so naive as to believe in God? But there's a verse in Proverbs that talks about how the more knowledge we gain, the further we get from God, because we start to put our trust in ourselves. And I think that that is really what's happening, is that people will go to any length to rationalize away the existence of God because they want to be able to trust in themselves and their own knowledge, and they don't want to have to answer to anybody. And so we become apathetic. We look around and we see the existence of God and the proof of the existence of God everywhere, but we just decide that it's easier to not have to follow someone and to not have to live our life in obedience to who God is. And so those things cost us in the end a relationship with God, and they tear other people away because other people start to put their trust in other humans or in education or whatever the case may be. So that's my example. I think there are others, but I think that's a good one, and it sort of correlates to today. As always, thanks for joining me for Ask Aaron. We'll be back next week with some questions about perhaps fallen angels and random giant people and all sorts of other exciting stuff. So catch me next week. Ask Aaron as always, and we'll talk to you then. Later.